A person living the life of Islam lives and breathes the awareness of God. Their whole life is full of taqwa. This sense of taqwa is promoted and maintained through the regular rhythm of formal prayer, or salah. During his audience with God, Muhammad was instructed that Muslims should pray formally 5 times a day, according to the passage of the sun, which set a pattern that can be followed no matter where on the face of the earth the Muslim might be. Even without a clock, people know the time for prayer by observing the sun. Many mosques now publish prayer timetables, as times change from week to week, according to the seasons of the year. As the sun rises and sets at different times in different places, a prayer timetable must be worked out for each location.
Taqwa is when you put your faith into practice. And it's not only faith. Any good idea, any good intention, when you put it into practice, it is taqwa. And that's why the Quran says at the very outset that this book is a guidance for muttaqeen, those who want to put good intention into practice. It involves a concept of fear from God. Of course, we should not fear from God because He's the one who's providing everything for us. But it probably means that we should have concerns about Him in every action, whether what we are going to do would please the one who has given us the opportunity of life. And in a sense, we are going to be held responsible and accountable towards Him. So taqwa is when, before every action, you put that sort of concern into your practice and take it into account.
During each salah, Muslims are brought back into the correct relationship with God. Human beings were created for the worship of God above all else. It keeps up their awareness of God, taqwa. It reminds them of key messages of guidance from the Quran. It provides an opportunity to acknowledge any sin that they might have fallen into. It is a conduit through which they receive and experience the forgiveness of God. It is like a river of mercy in which the Muslim is purified. It binds people together as a community of believers and gives the opportunity for seeking the blessings of God. It reminds Muslims of their debt of gratitude to Muhammad, whose example they follow, and of being part of the prophetic chain traced back through Abraham. Finally, it brings people to acknowledge the awesome presence of God, where the only human response is to prostrate, to lay one's forehead on the floor in humility, submission, love, and gratitude. To remind people that it's time to pray, the adhan is called so that everyone can hear. This is the haunting and atmospheric call with which many people will be familiar, made traditionally from the tall tower or minaret on a mosque, though increasingly nowadays from strategically mounted loudspeakers.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Salah can be performed alone or together with others. Fulfilling the duty as part of a congregation does have additional blessings and benefits, being an occasion for communal meeting and support. The Salat al-Jum'ah on Fridays is celebrated collectively, with everyone gathering at main mosques. It replaces the normal prayer in the middle of the day, but the prayer is shortened so that an address or khutbah can be given by a khatib or learned person. Friday is not a day of rest in Muslim societies, and people go back to work after prayers. Muhammad said that the whole world is a mosque, and this spirit still survives in the fact that any place can be used for prayer, as long as it is clean. The prayer mat is sometimes used to transform a space into a clean surface for prayer. However, mosques are usually carpeted, and shoes removed to maintain their cleanliness. There is no sense of rank in a mosque. Everyone is equal. Worshippers assemble in rows, shoulder to shoulder, with each row being completed from the front before the next row is begun. The Kaaba in Mecca is the earthly focus for all salah. Wherever Muslims are in the world, they turn towards it in prayer. This direction is called in Arabic Qibla. In a purpose-built mosque, one wall always faces towards Mecca, and the worshippers face it as they pray. Prayer is led by an imam, usually a man. This is not because women are considered inferior. All Muslims are equal in relation to God, regardless of gender. This is partly out of modesty, as during prayer the leader must prostrate with the forehead on the floor, and partly in recognition of the fact that religious leaders were also sometimes military commanders. In some schools of Islam, however, women lead groups of women and children in prayer. Just as the place of prayer must be clean, so must the worshipper, both physically and ritually. Physically, the body in general must be cleaned if necessary, by, for example, showering or bathing. Ritual cleansing is achieved by washing, or wudu, of the hands, face, mouth, nose, ears, head, arms, and feet, although the precise manner varies between the different schools of Islam. There are washing facilities in the mosque for this purpose. This is symbolic in the sense that it involves cleansing the parts of the body that we use as part of our working lives, and thus breaking off to spend time with God. We might also use these parts to commit sin. and so the washing gives us a chance to think of those things for which we need to ask God's forgiveness. For the Sunni, wudu begins by washing the hands 3 times under running water. The mouth and nose are rinsed out 3 times. The face is washed using wet hands. Then the forearms are washed, first the right and then the left. In Sunni practice, wet hands are passed over the whole head 3 times, and then the ears are cleaned with a finger. Again, first the right and then the left. Finally, the feet are washed. Note, as always, right, then left, and 3 times. Care is taken to ensure that the tap is turned off to avoid wasting water. The Shia begin the actual wudu by washing the face. The threefold washing of hands, mouth and nose are recommended but not obligatory. Notice that in Shia practice, the arms are washed in a downwards direction from the elbow to the wrist, and carefully wiped outside and inside. A wet hand is passed over the hair from the top of the head to the forelock. For the Shia, the feet need not to be washed. They need to be kept clean all the time and just wiped before the prayers. That means that for the Shia, the wudu is more a symbolic practice of wishing to cleanse the limbs from sin before every prayer, rather than an actual washing practice. In a mosque, there should be a separate women's entrance and washing facilities where possible. Where these cannot be provided, as in some smaller mosques, women may not be able to attend. Women and men pray as one single congregation in the mosque, but in separate areas. This is common in other religions and is not on account of any sense of the inequality of the sexes, but to prevent any immodesty or distractions. In traditional societies, women usually look after children and the elderly, and so are free to pray at home instead of joining the congregation for Friday prayer in the mosque. However, they are both allowed and encouraged to do so, in order that they may hear the teaching and feel part of the community at prayer. Some mosques now have a broadcast system, so that women and the housebound can hear at home what is happening in the mosque. The Salah begins with a declaration of the Muslim's intention to pray. Each compulsory or fard Salat is made up of a number of cycles of prayer, or rak'ah. The number of these varies depending on the time of day. Before sunrise, 2 cycles. A little after the sun has passed its midpoint, 4 cycles. In the late afternoon, 4 cycles. Directly after sunset, 3 cycles. At night time, 4 cycles. Each rak'ah comprises recitation of the Quran, bodily postures, and prayers said aloud or silently. The sequence is 1. Raising of the hands in a gesture of submission and withdrawal from the world, accompanied by the words Allahu Akbar, God is most great. 2. Recitation of the opening chapter of the Quran. 3. Recitation of a selection of verses from the Quran. 4. Bowing from the waist to acknowledge the guidance of God in the Quran, the worshipper saying in Arabic, All glory be to my Lord, the greatest, 3 times. 5. Standing in silent prayer in praise of God. 6. The first prostration, with the forehead and palms of the hands placed on the floor, in submission to God, during which the worshipper says, All glory be to my Lord, the highest, 3 times. To prostrate with the head, hands, knees, and feet on the floor before God is the ultimate sign of humility and submission before Almighty God. Thus lowering oneself, one is raised high by the grace of God. 7. Sitting back on the feet. 8. A second prostration of praise and glorifying God. 9. Returning to a standing position.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
At the end of the prescribed number of rak'ah, the Muslim recites the 2-part Shahada and calls for God's blessings upon Muhammad and his family and Abraham and his family. At the end, worshippers greet their immediate neighbors with As-salamu alaykum, peace be with you, and this is extended to the angels and the whole of creation. Many Muslims follow the example of the Prophet, the Sunnah, and make additional prayers before and after the compulsory rak'ah. The verses recited from the Quran are always in Arabic and must be spoken from memory and not read from a book. Every Muslim is required to have memorized some verses of Quran in order to be able to pray. The more that one has in one's memory, then the wider the selection that can be made. Even those who do not understand Arabic will have memorized the prayers of Salah and some verses of the Quran. New Muslims are encouraged to attend congregational prayer, with the Imam recites on behalf of all. The performance of Salah is obligatory and should not be abandoned even if physical movement is limited. Someone who needs to remain seated for salah can indicate prostration by moving their upper body. Someone who needs to lie down can move an arm. Ultimately, even the movement of an eyelid will suffice, with the right intention.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allah. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته نقوم وأكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كذلك الله ربي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الله.
Although there is a prescribed standard format for daily prayer in the form of salah, it would be a mistake to think that that is all that there is to prayer in Islam. Far from it. In addition to the salah, there are two other forms of prayer through which Muslims seek to foster their personal relationship with God. These are dua and thicker.
Dua are prayers in which the believer talks to God in any language and using their own words or written prayers. They relate to all the activities of our lives and can be said, for example, before going to work, eating, or going on a journey. Zikr is the prayer of the heart, in which the emphasis is placed on giving thanks to God and patiently accepting the will of God in all things. A typical example would be in the frequent repetition of phrases such as Alhamdulillah, all praise and thanks be to God, so that they pass beyond consciousness and become part of the very core of human life.
Salah should be performed with a humble heart, reflection and contemplation. The Prophet said, 2 simple units of prayer with contemplation are better than standing the whole night in prayer.